Okay. All
Okay.
right. Today we are moving on to session 3, concepts of FoRT, the Alphabetic Principle, and Phonics. So far we've discussed the phonological awareness umbrella and each of its components. We discussed the test logistics, and then today we're going to be introducing phonics.
We've also discussed question strategies, such as when you see a letter in the slash marks, it's making the sound, and when it's talking about the sound, it's typically talking about phonological awareness because there's no connection to written language. That's how they represent those sounds with the letters in the brackets.
All right, so then before moving on, if you want to just pause the video and then go ahead and try and recreate the phonological awareness umbrella as much as you can. Provide as many components and examples as you can on your own. It's a great reflection to do and to practice because it shows you what you have learned, what you know for sure, and how much time you've really spent outside of the group sessions reviewing. So do the best you can. It's okay if you don't know everything. Just try and get as much as you can. So if you want to pause the video. And then as soon as you're done, we'll continue on. So then go ahead and check how you did. So see how many things you got and make sure it's in the correct order, because again, this does have a set sequence. And as well, like same with phonemic awareness, make sure that those are all in order because they'll go from least complex to more complex.
And it's a very, very beneficial thing to remember and write down on your whiteboard right away if possible. So seeing how much you remember right now would be a good indication of how much you can really use yourself as a resource, which is what you'll be doing for yourself on your whiteboard.
All right. So then moving on again, we posted to Canvas a link to a Google form response. We just wanted to get your input on what we can do moving forward, how we can better prepare you for the FoRT, including teaching strategies, content, etc. So if you have not already, go ahead and click that link that's in the PowerPoint or on Canvas and take that survey because we will use that information to make the further presentations that we have for the rest of the semester. And it's all just because we want your input and we want you to feel prepared and be successful. You could try and be specific on the form. We do ask what you'd like to learn about more. Don't just put everything. We would love to cover everything, and we have covered a lot of it already. So we want to know the specific things that we can do moving forward for you. The more specific you are, the better it'll be for your case. Sorry. So from the responses so far, we saw that we should include a lot more practice questions. So just to reassure you of that, we will include many more of the practice questions. Our presentation so far is a couple hundred slides, and probably about 50%-ish, I would say, is practice questions. So we're trying to even out the content and the practice. We really want you to apply your knowledge, so we do include a lot of those. And then we did ask how many multiple choice questions there were in the FoRT. So there are a total of 100 multiple choice questions and 2 essay responses. So there's not just 98 multiple choice and 2 essay responses, there's 100. So make sure that you are prepared and you know that. And it may be a good idea to look over and familiarize yourself with what those essay responses would look like, because that will be something that we cover in the future. So then again, we're using your responses to cover whatever you're writing down after spring break, which is coming up pretty fast. So try to be specific. If you have not, you can go back again and do so. And then for those of you who said you were taking it within the next 6 months, good luck, and we hope you do well, and we hope that this helped.
And many respondents indicated that they were taking it within the next 6 months, so don't be afraid to use each other as resources as well. If you know someone's taking it in 2 weeks, 3 weeks, it definitely doesn't ever hurt to ask them, how was it? What surprised you? How do you feel? Things like that. You might not like all their answers. They might tell you you need to really look over something that you might not have yet, but it is always helpful to hear about that experience.
And again, too, if you are taking it within the next 6 months and you don't feel prepared yet, do take advantage of our individual hours as well. Right now, we can be pretty flexible on when we're scheduling appointments. If you want to focus in on, one thing in detail, we can do that with you, and feel free to use us as a resource. That's our job, so we're here for you, and we can help you with anything regarding the FoRT.
And there were a few questions about an exact timeline, and we kind of talked about this in the last video, but if you didn't hear that, there's not really a hard and fast rule about exactly a grade level, and there are no questions that say, what can a first grader do? All first graders are different, and you will also encounter questions about different types of second graders, first graders. You will encounter questions about English language learners. So we can't really tell you an exact timeline because all children develop differently, and the test takers know that. Roughly preschool through first grade are working with the sounds, the rhyming, the beginning sounds. You can think about in kindergarten how you have lessons on letters. They come in, they can write their name, then they learn to write more words, and they start connecting those letters to the sound. That's phonics, first to third grade. Fourth grade and up questions are typically about spelling, comprehension, fluency, and context clues. That's a rough timeline of some of the skills that definitely consistently align. But like I said, we all develop differently, and they like to ask you questions about, there's a first grader who is having trouble blending these sounds. So knowing their grade isn't going to ever give you the answer. So that's kind of the last bullet point there. Knowing a kindergartner develops under the phonological awareness umbrella will never be all that you need to know for an answer. However, it would help you frame your response if you're looking at a phonological awareness question and a fifth grader, a sixth grader, and then a kindergartner, and they're all doing something. Typically, the kindergartner is going to be rhyming, which would be a phonological awareness skill. But unfortunately, like we've mentioned before, it is a highly scenario-based test. So unfortunately, there's not outwardly any questions about what can a first grader do, because there are many different kinds of first graders in the world. Therefore, there are many different kinds of first graders, second graders, third graders, and up on the test as well.
Yeah, and to kind of put that into perspective, so like for me this semester, this made a lot of sense to me because I had a fourth grade student who was working on specifically phonics instruction, that was receiving special education services. So that really just shows you that each student develops differently. So I always keep that in mind when, obviously, like decoding the questions, seeing the grade level, knowing to myself that, oh, everybody's different. So that's not specifically going to give me the answer, but the content of the question is.
So if you do have further interest, and that's just a really concerning area to you, an option for you would be to go to the practice test and control find, or write down a list, tally up all the students in different grade levels and what they're working on. That wouldn't be extremely useful for your time, because like I said, you never know if you're going to come across an English language learner or a student that's developing below grade level or has really great comprehension skills. But if you are really curious about that framework, you can control find all those different words on the practice test and see what those questions relate to. So again, I wish there was a timeline, but like Katie said, you can have a fourth grader working on phonics. But if you introduce the letter M to a kindergartner and say this makes the sound, you're also technically doing phonics instruction. So that's why we say use the age and the grade level as a general guideline, because it'll never outwardly be all you need to know for the answer.
Yeah, and this would be helpful too if you do go and control find. You can work on decoding those kinds of questions so you can get yourself used to seeing the grade, and really trying to, use the grade as the general framework, like Juliet was saying, but really see what the question's asking. So if you're just practicing decoding questions like that do have the grade that may throw you off on the test, it wouldn't be a bad idea to just go ahead and practice, like I said, decoding those questions, finding what the question's really asking around the grade level. All right, so then moving on into the content. So phonics concepts and instruction may include, so the goal of phonics instruction overall is to help children learn and use the alphabetic principle. And what the alphabetic principle is it's the understanding that there are systematic and predictable relationships between letters and spoken sounds. So I know like in the last slide, or the last slide, Juliet was saying how you could give a kindergartner the letter M and you could tell them it makes the sound. So I know a lot of kindergarten classes usually do days of letters, so they'll learn a letter a day or a week or whatever. So say on Valentine's Day, students were learning how to say the V sound, and they would relate that to the letter V. So that's what the alphabetic principle is it's connecting the letters and spoken sounds. So students will have to know and use this in phonics instruction. So how I like to draw this out is we have our phonological awareness umbrella on the left, and the alphabetic principle is what bridges to phonics. So I draw a bridge from my umbrella all the way to phonics instruction. And that's where you're flipping the switch with the lights on. So you're starting to turn on the lights and everything's starting to be visual and auditory.
Yep, so that connection to written language begins with introducing those letters of the alphabet and their corresponding sounds. The terminology in this section is wordy and repetitive. However, certain definitions might resonate better with certain learners, and we have a variety of learners. So just bear with us as we work through the terminology and get to the practice questions.
So again, alphabetic principle is the bridge from phonological awareness to phonemic awareness. It's the concept that letters and letter combinations represent individual phonemes, which are those sounds in written words. So again, like we were saying, it's the bridge from phonological awareness to phonemic awareness to phonics. So the picture to the right here is a great representation of what phonics is, because it's taking that it's putting together the knowledge of phonological and phonemic awareness. You're clicking that in with the alphabetic principle, and that's what phonics is going to be covering. So it's going to be taking those and expanding on those, relating those sounds to those letters.
So the ability to associate sounds with their letters and use those sounds to form words is where the alphabetic principle comes in. So if you have a student sounding out the word map and they know that M makes the sound, A makes the sound, and P makes the P sound, those are consistent sounds matching with those letters, so then they can put those together to make the word map. So the understanding that words in spoken language are represented in print relates to this, and then sounds and words relate to the letters that represent them. If you're hearing a word book, look, took, shook, crook, you're going to have some similarity in terms of the letters that represent that similar sound in the middle. So the recognition that phonemes are represented by letters and letter pairs. So sounds are consistent with the letters that represent them, which is why teaching the alphabet comes before and during teaching reading, because those are the sounds that they use to make out the words.
So then again, I was saying how the alphabetic principle is kind of where you're flipping on that light switch. So phonological awareness is everything with the lights off. It's auditory, it's focusing strictly on sounds. The alphabetic principle in phonics, you're starting to turn the lights on. So phonics is everything is lights on. So it's both auditory and visual. So there are many definitions to phonics, and you will find that. It's definitely one of the most complex and, I guess, harder to navigate concepts that you'll have to know on the FoRT. So these are just two definitions that we have here, and there will be several more. So phonics is an instructional strategy which teaches about the relationship between letters and their sounds. And it's also known as the study of the relationship between letters and the sounds they represent. It's also used to describe reading instruction that teaches sound symbol correspondences. So this is a very complex topic, and it has a wide range of what it teaches to students as they are developing further towards reading.
And the definition is very similar to the alphabetic principle, where you're talking about connecting those letters with sounds. Phonics, the fact that it's called the study of the relationships between letters and sounds, can kind of give you that broader term, like it makes it seem like a broader term, which it is, whereas the alphabetic principle is focusing on the literal alphabet letters, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, whereas when you get into phonics, you can focus on word parts such as book, look, took, shook, crook. That sound in the middle is not just one letter, or like tough, rough with the O-U-G-H. That's not just one letter. Those letters are coming together to make sounds. That would fall more under phonics, whereas the alphabetic principle, you can think about literal A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and so on. Phonics instruction can take the form of either being explicit or implicit. So explicit phonics instruction is like Katie mentioned, where kindergartners might outwardly have a lesson on a letter. So they're directly teaching that sound. The students are told V makes the V sound. They are looking at V words, things like that. So this explicit is where it builds from part to whole. So you're starting with that smaller letter sound or grapheme, and the associated phoneme where like M is and V is V. So you can think about more like kindergarten style lessons, but as learners develop, they'll see that there are, of course, unique patterns and things like that. So they will also pick up through implicit phonics instruction, which is where they're applying something that they've seen in other words to a new word. So of course, not every single word is outwardly taught as students learn to read, but if they know that, if they're looking at a book about singing and the next week they look at a book about biking, but they're not quite sure how to say it, they can take their understanding that that ing on the end of that singing makes the ing sound. So then the ing at the end of bike must be biking. So for phonics instruction, moving from whole to smallest part would be implicit. So phonemes and graphemes aren't taught in isolation. Students analyze words and look for commonalities. So that was our example there. So of course we're not outwardly teaching every single word, and not every single word is a sight word, but there are commonalities, and when they apply their understanding of those commonalities, or they knew how to pronounce it, a word part in a different word, they can carry that understanding into a new word.
All right, so let's move on to our first practice question. So number 34 here says, a student who has mastered which of the following skills along the phonological awareness continuum is best prepared to begin explicit phonics instruction? So think about that question right away. Notice that it's talking about the phonological awareness continuum. So, and they are best prepared to begin explicit phonics instruction. So the options are A, being aware that a word is made up of one or more phonemes. B, being able to separate a word's onset and rhyme. C, being aware that words can be divided into syllables. Or D, being able to segment and blend a word's phonemes. So you can go ahead and pause the video if you want to think about that, and then we'll go over the answers. So let's start with A. So A is being aware that a word is made up of one or more phonemes. So a student that is is best prepared to begin the explicit phonics instruction. So being aware that a word is made up of one or more phonemes. So the general awareness that a word is made up of one or more phonemes comes pretty early in the phonological awareness continuum that we know of, which would be our umbrella and all of its components. So I'm going to go ahead and push that one to the side. It is related, but I don't think that's the best answer. So it's in the very early stages. So we're just going to go ahead and get rid of that one. So B then is being able to separate a word's onset and rhyme. So again, that's a pretty basic skills, but it happens before phonemic awareness, which is the highest level phonological awareness. So I'm going to go ahead and just keep reading my answers. So then C is being aware that words can be divided into syllables. So that's before onset and rhyme, right? So again, a lower level skill. So I'm going to get rid of C. D is being able to segment and blend a word's phonemes. So I know that segmentation and blending is a part of phonemic awareness. So right now that's my highest level skill. That would prove that students are best prepared to begin explicit phonics instruction. And again, it's focusing on the part of a word. So it's focusing on the individual sounds and manipulating those sounds. So that also tells me that they're ready to begin the explicit phonics instruction. So the best answer here would be D.
Then going a little bit deeper into that, phoneme blending of a word, if a student looked at the word cat and they weren't sure how to say it, being able to blend those phonemes and use their understanding of the alphabetic principle of making the k at sound for each of those letters is the best choice of a prerequisite skill, that phoneme blending. They're still using an awareness that words are made of more than one sound, but they have a bit more sophistication to that awareness where they're actually able to figure out what those sounds are. B and C were phonological awareness skills that came earlier in the umbrella, as Katie mentioned, and A was incorrect because the skill indicates phonemic awareness in the early stages. So like she said, it was related, but it's not the most sophisticated level. And we want to be furthest down on that umbrella as we can be before we're actually moving on. So a student would master all phonemic awareness components of phonological awareness to demonstrate readiness. So the most advanced form of awareness, which was blending phonemes, would be the best option, which was D.
Yeah, and again, this relates back to the continuum. So being able to take your umbrella and write it down on your whiteboard right away once you get into that room will help you a lot in that sense with a lot of the questions, as you'll see as we're practicing. So it's definitely important to master that concept and that visual. There's several ways you can represent it, so don't feel like you have to use the umbrella. We do provide a bunch on the last session and within our slides. So then moving on to the focus for phonics instruction. So again, we already had talked about the definition of phonics. So there's several of them, but the focus of phonics instruction overall has several components. So we're just going to run through a little bit of an overlook of what we'll be diving into. So first of all, again, we'll talk about the letters and name sounds. So we'll talk about the letters and name the sounds. Sorry, I can't talk. So this will help students understand that letters and clusters of letters make up words represented by their separate spoken sounds. So again, as we were saying earlier, explicit phonics instruction would be, in kindergarten, you're learning a letter a day. So you're seeing M and knowing it makes the sound. And then again, recognizing like parts. So in book, look, and cook, the sound. So that's when we'll be focusing on those relationships, the letters and the sounds that they make. We'll talk about short vowels and CVC patterns. So then the phonics instruction for this would be teaching children how to recognize words with vowel consonant or consonant vowel consonant patterns, and we'll go through and recognize all of the different types of patterns there are, because there are several, and just the short vowels. So a short vowel, for example, being hit, the vowel does not say its name. Consonant digraphs, which we touched on just a little bit. So that's when two or more consecutive consonants represent a single sound. So that would be the sh, ch, f. So you're not hearing each individual letter. Make it sound. It's two letters coming together to make a new sound. And consonant blends, which is the opposite of that, is when two or more consecutive consonants make their own sounds. So, for example, in blends, you can hear the bl. So B and L, for that case, the bl is you're hearing b, bl. So you can hear both of the consonant sounds.
And then some more examples. The E at the end of CVC pattern words, it was when the vowel says its name. So if you think about bid or rid versus ride or bide, when you have that E at the end, the students will learn that pattern to say the vowel differently. A-N-E is a good one at the end. Can versus cane, or Dan versus Dane. So when there's a vowel at the end, when there's an E at the end of a CVC word, consonant vowel consonant word, it says its name. R controlled vowel words are when an R stands for a special sound that's neither long nor short at the end of a word. So car, bird, fur, fur, things like that. And then advanced consonants. So those unique patterns like gnome or knight or edge, they'll learn those and apply and continue to apply those sounds, those different sounds. Vowel teams, diphthongs, and digraphs, the way that we will say those vowels differently depending on what other letters they're next to. And then syllable patterns. Students need to be able to decode the parts from multi-syllable words so they can apply their understanding of a word part such as ing if the word was biking and apply that on there. And then prefixes and suffixes are units that are added to root words to form new words, such as like re or un at the beginning of the word and ed or ing at the end of a word.
So then just reviewing and touching on the alphabetic principle again. So the alphabetic principle tells us that there are specific relationships between written letters and spoken words. So many children begin school with a concept of the alphabetic principle, so a general age framework connection there again. So overall, it's the idea that letter patterns represent sounds of spoken language. Again, we just want to drill and kind of hammer that out there because it is the bridge to phonics again. And it comes before the phonics instruction. So that general idea of the alphabetic principle will be important for knowing the framework again and moving towards phonics. So the related skills for this are letter sound correspondence, letter naming, and letter formation. So again, relating that straight to the alphabet will be important. So letter sound correspondence, we'll dive into all these concepts here in the next couple slides. They're pretty self-explanatory once you think about it a little bit. So knowing a letter has a corresponding sound, being able to name a letter, so naming the letter M, and then letter formation is knowledge of the letter shape. So being able to, maybe begin to write the letters, or you can see the letter and know its name.
So, like she said, it's the bridge from phonological awareness to phonics. It's developmentally appropriate for phonics to begin once the alphabetic principle is understood. So once students can match each letter with the letter sound, they're ready to put those sounds together and make words. So phonics instruction is designed to help students study the systematic relationship between letters and sounds. That consistency, like we talked about, is crucial for a student to know what sound to approach a word that starts with M with is the sound. So now, you could take a moment to pause rather than share with your table neighbor in your notebook how the relationship is systematic. So think of teaching students the letter M and the sound and kind of how you could benefit from the fact that it's systematic. So to go off of that, the fact is that M is going to really always make the sound. So that's how you're able to outwardly teach that letter and the letter sound, and then they can approach any word that starts with an M and make the sound. So that's how it's systematic. All of the letters make consistent sounds or a variation of similar sounds.
So moving forward to some applied practice. So the question is, a kindergarten teacher wants to promote students' understanding of the alphabetic principle. Which of the following would be the most effective first step in a sequence of instruction designed to achieve this goal? So reading the question, I am looking for things that relate to the alphabetic principle and something that would be the first step in a sequence of instruction to achieve that goal, to understand that alphabetic principle. So my options are A, talk with students about selected consonants using a series of posters that each feature one consonant and contain pictures of items whose initial phoneme demonstrates that consonant's sound. So here you're using one phoneme again, and you're putting maybe pictures or words up there that start with that phoneme. So you're focusing on that one sound and that one letter. B, have students trace both upper and lowercase letters of the alphabet and then practice reproducing the letters on their own. So right away, that is not so much the alphabetic principle, that's more phonics, because remember the alphabetic principle is knowing that written letters have sounds, and this has nothing to do with sound. So I'm gonna get rid of B right away. C, talk with students about the title, beginning, middle, and end of a story and point to these parts while reading the story aloud from a big book. So that one is just silly. It's kind of irrelevant. It has nothing to do with the alphabetic principle yet. So I'm going to go ahead and get rid of C. That might be part of phonics, but not so much focused on the alphabetic principle. So then D, put labels on several familiar objects in the classroom and regularly read the labels aloud to the students. So right now I'm stuck between A and D. So which one would come first in a step or in a sequence of steps? I'm going to say that the answer is A, because that's focusing on, again, that specific phoneme, and you're putting pictures of items whose initial phoneme demonstrate that consonant sound. So you're directly linking the sound to the letter, where D might come a little later in the sequence by putting several familiar, or putting labels on the objects might be a little more of an advanced step. So again, the correct answer was A. So the alphabetic principle entails the recognition that letters and letter patterns used in writing in alphabetic language correspond to sounds in spoken words of the language. So the activity described in A would promote understanding of the relationship between letters and the initial sounds in familiar words. So again, you're focusing on that one individual initial phoneme in the words, and then again, focusing on relating that to that letter. So it's appropriate to use an early instruction on the alphabetic principle, where maybe D would be a little later in that sequence again.
So with that letter sound correspondence, to read fluently, a student must master those sounds that correspond with the letters. So the basic units of sounds in language, the phonemes, connected to the letters that map those sounds. And then letter sound correspondence, making a connection between individual letters and the sounds they represent. So Katie and the K sound for the beginning is that connection like we've been talking about.
So then if you want to just take a moment to pause rather than tell your table neighbors. So just ask yourself what the bridge from phonemic awareness to phonics is. Hopefully you know that by now. So yeah, the bridge to phonics is the alphabetic principle. So the alphabetic principle and phonics are used interchangeably, like we said. But before analyzing and really diving into the relationships between the letters and sounds, students need an understanding of the fact that letter patterns represent sounds. So phonics is where you dive into all of those aspects. So for example, like R-controlled vowels. Oh gosh, all right. So then this video, let's see if we can get this going.
Welcome to the Alphabetic Principle module. At phonological awareness can be sorted into two groups, consonants and vowels, as the foundation of phonics instruction. Letters. First, we know that letters can be sorted into two groups, consonants and vowels. As young children, we learn that vowels are A, E, I, O, and U, and consonants are all the rest of the letters. Students will need to know the difference between vowels and consonants when learning rules for pronunciation, syllabification, and spelling. Vowels can be produced as short and long sounds. The breve, shaped like a small U, indicates a short vowel sound, as in a and I. The macron, a small flat line, indicates a long vowel sound, as in A and I. Graphemes refer to letters of the alphabet. Phonemes are the sounds that are represented by graphemes. A digraph is composed of two letters that represent one sound. There can be vowel digraphs, as in AI in rain and EA in seal, and consonant digraphs, like SH in ship and CK in lick. Finally, there can also be consonant trigraphs, like TCH. Consonant blends, unlike digraphs, retain their individual sounds even though they are produced quickly together. Here are some examples of consonant blends. Listen to hear each sound as I produce them. Fo, spo, tur, gur, dur, st. Blends retain their individual phoneme sounds and are counted as multiple phonemes. Finally, there are diphthongs. A diphthong is also referred to as a gliding vowel. Diphthongs are two adjacent vowels within the same syllable, like the oi in boy, and soil, poison, loyal, and broil. Diphthongs are counted as one phoneme. Congratulations, you now have a solid phonics vocabulary. Let's review. The alphabetic principle is the understanding that words are composed of letters that represent sounds. Building students' phonological awareness involves the segmenting of sounds at various levels of the sound structure. Students who develop proficiency with phonological awareness will have an easier time connecting those sounds to letters. When we teach students to make sound-to-letter connections, we are teaching phonics. Some basic phonics terms include consonants and vowels, breve and macron, which indicate short and long vowel sounds, graphemes, digraphs, consonant blends, and diphthongs. When teachers combine phonological awareness with letter instruction, phonics, students will understand the alphabetic principle. For more information on what phonics is, be sure to check out the phonics module that is part of this series.
All right, sweet. So that was a good review of kind of what we talked about today, and then diving into what we will cover. So again, the video kind of touched on this too, but the foundation for phonics instruction, a little bit of an expansion on that. So phonics combines those sounds and letters, so phonemes and graphemes. So a phoneme is a single speech sound. It's the smallest unit of spoken language, and graphemes represent phonemes, so they're the letters, so they are the smallest unit of written language. So when we teach students to make the sound to letter connection or connecting those phonemes and graphemes, we are teaching them phonics.
So graphemes, like we talked about, are the matched map out of the sounds of written language. So with mop, we have m, op. Each phoneme is represented by a letter in this case. Graphemes as letters, kind of like a written graph, like the written version of the letters, kind of a nice way to help you remember. So graphemes as letters is written, and letters are the beginning of writing words. So they get to know those individual speech sounds, and then they get to learn how those are mapped, and then they put those sounds and letters together to make words. And then diphthong vowels, so kind of like how we have consonant blends where we outwardly hear both consonants. With vowels, we have something called a diphthong, where it's two adjacent vowels that glide, where we outwardly have a different sound coming together to produce. So diphthongs are counted as one phoneme. One sound is produced, but it's more than one vowel coming together. So like in pay, we hear the A and the Y. In foil, we hear the O and the I sound. In boy, we hear the O and the Y sound. And then in like round or how, we hear the ow sound. We hear both of those vowels. So you can kind of think of a diphthong as the vowel version of hearing both sounds. So there are gliding vowels where your mouth will move from, your mouth will outwardly say both of the sounds.
Yeah, so then again, going over phonics instruction. So phonics instruction teaches the relationship between the letters, which are graphemes of written language, and the individual sounds of spoken language, which are phonemes. So it teaches children to use the relationships to read and write words. So the goal of phonics instruction overall is to help children learn and use the alphabetic principle, which is the understanding that there are systematic and predictable relationships between written letters and spoken words. So go ahead.
A teacher can most effectively support a first grader's development of rapid automatic word recognition by first teaching students how to. So we're talking about how can a first grader look at words and automatically recognize those. So the options are: apply consistent phonics generalizations in common words, use context clues to determine the meanings of words, identify the constituent parts of multisyllable words, or look up unfamiliar words in the dictionary. So I'm going to start from the bottom and work my way up. Looking up an unfamiliar word in the dictionary is not rapid, is not automatic, and looking up that definition is not going to help them recognize that word really, because they're just going to be matching the letters, finding it, finding the definition. That's not rapid automatic word definition recognition. That's talking more about what that word means, and maybe they're looking at the pronunciation of it in the dictionary, but looking up an unfamiliar word is not very rapid. Identify constituent parts of multisyllable words. So, and use context clues to determine the meanings of words. Again, those are possible strategies, but they are not the most rapid. Context clues, again, we're not talking about individual words. First graders, we are talking about how they can recognize words. So using context clues to develop the meaning, we're not really focusing on that skill of them matching the letters, which is likely a type of skill that first graders are working on. So if we look at A, apply consistent phonics generalizations in common words, So if we have a unit on the word part BL, blue, blonde, blob, blooming, like black, all of those sounds, and they come across a new word that starts with BL, and you've just talked about that bull sound, they can apply that generalization into any other word. So teaching those consistent parts is why A would be a good option. So automaticity is the rapid recognition of a word without conscious attention to the decoding process. So taking that familiar word part and automatically applying it would be an accurate and effective and rapid decoding skill. So teaching children those patterns in words is very important. Those, like we talked about, that the alphabetic principle and phonics, like there is consistency between the sounds that letters make. So their ability to apply that to new words will help them recognize them and pronounce them quickly. So B is incorrect because reliance on context clues wouldn't facilitate automatic word recognition because words can be surrounded by different words all the time. C is incorrect because dividing multi-syllable words into constituent parts is an advanced skill. We're talking about a first grader working with smaller words. That is a good skill for multi-syllable words, but that's not the best option for a first grader. D is incorrect because looking up words in a dictionary is related to decoding, and it's not typically about, that's not so much about phonics. That's more so about getting that word meaning, and that's not the most rapid option.
Yeah, so then moving forward, concepts of print is also going to be a part of phonics instruction. So this includes the following. 1 is parts of a book, 2 is print carries meaning, 3 is tracking print, words in a sentence, letters within words, and then letter names. And we will dive into all of these, so don't feel overwhelmed that you don't know what these are. So breaking those down. Parts of a book, so this includes book handling skills. So that's where a student is learning how to or knows how to hold a book upright. They can identify the cover and the back of a book. They can identify where the title is located, the beginning, middle, and end of a book. And this is where they have a general awareness that they know to begin reading on the first page. So they overall use the book correctly and it's not a toy. And they'll start to understand print directionality. So that's where we read left to right, top to bottom of a page, and then the direction of reading print again. So when you get to the bottom of a page, you're moving to the top of the other page. So an example of a skill that a student would be able to do is point to the title of the book.
So the fact that print carries meaning, students will also start to demonstrate. So students can demonstrate this understanding by the fact that the words and the written letters at the bottom of a page relate to the picture. They are what the reader is saying. So where you say, like, point to where I begin, that's where the story begins. So their understanding of the fact that the words relate to what's being said and what the pictures are in the book. And then the importance of print. So environmental print is print that is surrounding students, so such as signs and labels and different kind of posters in a classroom, even if it's there every day. So environmental print is things that are all around us. Students over time start to pick up on those, but it doesn't directly correlate to their ability to read later on because it's typically the same signs like stop sign or Target sign or labels on food like Cheerios. And then print awareness is that understanding that words convey thoughts. Words are made up of letters and spaces appear between words. So that kind of a little bit deeper understanding into the fact that the spaces between words are also where you pause in speech and relate to how you are saying things.
So then tracking print, so this is where like a student can point to each word as they read left to right. Some skills for teaching how to track print is finger tracking or thumb tracking. There are several different ways you can track print, whether you use a Post-it note and you cover up the next few words and you use that to track your print. So this concept is fairly simple, kind of says it in its name again, so students will be able to track print as they're reading. And then words and sentences, so This is when students are aware that sentences are made up of words, so they can point to a word in a sentence, etc. And then breaking that down further, there are letters within words, so students know that or can recognize that words are made up of letters, so they can point to a letter in a word, or they can show you a capital or lowercase letter in a word. So they're demonstrating their knowledge of what the sounds and the letters explicitly there.
And then letter names. What letter is this? What sound does this letter make? Pretty self-explanatory. You can kind of think about skills that a preschooler or a kindergartner would do, especially you can think about their names. If you, like, kids have a lot of practice writing their names and then matching the sounds that they say with the letters that they map their name with. So what letter does your name start with? And they could say the letter, they could say the sound. So a preschool child picks up an unfamiliar book, opens it to the end, points to the text, and begins to pretend read the story. These behaviors suggest that the child most likely, A, has a well-developed book handling skills, B, knows where individual words begin and end, C, has developed an understanding that print carries meaning, or D, understands the concept of print directionality. So for A, has developed book handling skills. So their ability to pick up and hold the book is good. However, they open it to the end, and stories start in the beginning, not at the end. So there could be a better option here. Knows where individual words begin and end. So all that I know is that they're pretend reading the story. I don't explicitly have where they're pointing to words or if they're even pointing. I just know that they're pretending to read. So B, we just don't have enough information about how they are pretend reading for that to qualify as an appropriate answer. For C, has developed an understanding that print carries meaning. So a child that's picking up a book, opening it to end, pointing to words, and pretend reading is demonstrating that they know that the writing in the book is how you produce the words for the story. So that would work. And then D, understands the concept of print directionality. Again, we just have points to the text. For all we know, they could be pointing from right to left, top to bottom. So at the surface level, a student that opens up a book and points to the text and is pretending to read it is demonstrating that print carries meaning by looking at the text and saying words. So I talked about why D is incorrect. So C is a possible answer because their action in itself is taking text and making words. So C was the best answer. Pretend reading, pointing to the text, indicates an understanding that print carries meaning. And A is incorrect because the child begins reading from the end of the book, which indicates a lack of basic book handling skills. And then B is incorrect because the child does not point to or decode separate words. They only pretend read. We have points to the text. We don't have specific information about them pointing to individual words.
So then again, another practice question. So at the end of each school day, a preschool teacher encourages the children to talk about the day's events. As the children describe each event, the teacher writes on a large block paper. Afterward, the teacher reads the list back to the class. This activity would contribute to the children's literacy development primarily by promoting their A, basic understanding of the alphabetic principle, B, awareness that speech can be represented by writing, C, basic understanding of word boundaries, or D, awareness of the relationship between syllables and the spoken words. So right away, we're going to go ahead and we're going to rule out two options. So let's look at A. So A is the basic understanding of the alphabetic principle. So I'm going to go ahead and rule this one out just because she's not specifically focusing on the individual letters and the sounds that they represent. And then I'm also going to go ahead and get rid of D, which is awareness of the relationship between syllables and the spoken word. So again, she's not specifically or explicitly breaking the word down into its syllables. She's just demonstrating that the students, what they're saying is being written on a block paper, so it doesn't say anything about it being broken into syllables. So again, why is A incorrect? So again, she's not explicitly stating or demonstrating the relationship between those individual sounds and spoken words. And she's not focusing on the letters that are being represented by the sounds again in the words that are in writing. So then we'll talk about C as well. So we're going to rule out C right away. So why is C incorrect? So C is incorrect because the teacher's strategy does not highlight the individual words or provide explicit instruction in segmenting sentences into words, which will be related to word boundaries, which we'll talk about further. And then D, again, we talked about that because it's incorrect because it doesn't highlight the individual syllables or provide explicit instruction in the component syllables of the spoken words. So then that leaves us with B as our correct answer. So, excuse me, that's the awareness that speech can be represented by writing. So this directly links them. So the students are speaking a word, and then the teacher is explicitly making a connection by writing it down. So basically, she's demonstrating, modeling that their spoken utterances can be recorded in writing, and that the written record can be decoded into spoken form later on. So B is the correct answer.
And then pointing to the title, beginning, middle, and end of a book to a group of preschool children before reading the book aloud contributes to their reading development primarily by promoting their A, understanding of text directionality, B, development of book handling skills, C, understanding of the concept of schema, and D, development of literal comprehension strategies. So, development of literal comprehension strategies, again, we can look at our framework. We're talking about someone who's just pointing to preschool children. Preschool children are likely not yet talking about literal comprehension strategy, and we don't even know that she's reading them the text. At surface level, all we know is that, well, she's reading the book out loud, but at surface level, she could just be pointing to the beginning, middle, and end, and then reading it. We don't know the depth to which they're going into it. Understanding the concept of a schema, so that's where students store information about a related concept, so like a zoo, and then they have a whole schema of zoo animals or zoo jobs. So pointing to the beginning, middle, and end, and again, just reading the book. We don't quite know what the book is related to or if they're talking about it. Development of book handling skills. So directly book handling skills in this are pointing to those book parts. Those are important to know for a student to read properly. And then understanding of text directionality. So while reading the book out loud to the student and showing them the order in which she's reading it, that is helpful. But the development of book handling skills. So if we were to rule out one possible option, right away we can rule out D, development of literal comprehension strategies, and as well as C, understanding of the concept of a schema. So then how she's going into it with the book handling skills. So showing them where to even start the book is part of handling a book properly. Text directionality goes more into on a literal page, top to bottom, left to right, things like that. So the skills that she is showing them are more related to the order in which the book is read. And then A is incorrect because the teacher does not show the lines of the text or how to track print. Again, that left to right, top to bottom. We just know that she's showing them the parts of the book and then reading it. Then C is incorrect because the teacher does not attempt to access background knowledge related to the text. We don't know that. We just know that she's reading it aloud. And then D, the activity is not focused on teaching students comprehension strategies. We just know that she's reading it. We don't know the depth that they're going into it after.
All right, so then another practice question. So print awareness does not include which of the following? So right away, I'm going to go back and I'm going to think what print awareness is. So print awareness is the understanding that written language carries meaning. And this is kind of where it includes that print directionality as well. So knowing that vocab word will help you a lot in this question. So reading our options then, A, understanding that printed numbers carry meaning. B, understanding that printed words carry meaning. C, understanding that English print moves from top to bottom and from left to right. Or D, understanding that spoken language can be broken into sounds. So again, we're looking what print awareness does not include. So right away, knowing my definition, I can eliminate 3 options, and that's A, B, and C. So print awareness, like I said, is the understanding that written language, excuse me, which includes both numbers and words, carries meaning, and it also includes that print directionality. So the answer would be D right away, just knowing that vocab word. So D is understanding that spoken language can be broken into sounds. So print awareness, that is not print awareness. Again, that would be more aimed at phonemic awareness, phonological awareness-ish. So again, knowing the definition for that will be extremely helpful. Yeah, go ahead.
Print awareness, a young child who has not yet learned to read likes to listen to stories. She and her mother sit side by side while her mother reads and traces the text with her finger. During this process, the child learns directionality of print, spacing, and the alphabetic principle. What is the first step of the reading process? What first step of the reading process is being demonstrated in this example? So which of the following is false about environmental print? So environmental print includes words and print that surround children daily. Children often show emergent reading by pretending to read familiar signs or visible print. Environmental print has clear correlation to one's later reading abilities. And D, environmental print contributes to children's print awareness. So we are all surrounded by the same print. All students in a classroom are surrounded by the same signs, the same posters, but they all read at different levels. So C would be the answer there. Environmental print does not clearly correlate to later abilities in life, as we are all surrounded by the same signs, but develop as readers at different levels. So environmental print is the print surrounding us. Students that are beginning to read might start to recognize, hey, stop sign begins with an S if they just did a lesson on that letter. Environmental print, it does contribute to their print awareness. The fact that print carries meaning. If Target is a store and then they see the Target sign, that means something. That's what they're saying. That's what the store is called, is what the letters spell out. But it does not correlate to later abilities.
All right, so then another practice question. Having kindergarten children practice tracing letters of the alphabet in sand is most appropriate for children who are having difficulty. A, internalizing the alphabetic principle. B, recognizing that print carries meaning. C, understanding the relationship between spoken and written language. Or D, developing letter formation skills. So we're going to go ahead and discuss why C and A would both be incorrect. So C, let's look at C. So understanding the relationship between spoken and written language. So in the question, it doesn't really mention anything about spoken language. So there's not any auditory parts of that. So it's not addressing the activity. So right away, we can go ahead and get rid of that one. And then again, A would be incorrect because it doesn't address the relationship between the alphabetic writing system of English and the sounds of spoken language again. So it's not relating the two sounds and the letters. So then go ahead and look at your last two options, so B or D. So I'll give you a second to think about that. So B is recognizing that print carries meaning, and then D is developing letter formation skills. So I'm going to go ahead and say that D is the correct answer, and this is because B is incorrect because the function of print is not addressed in the activity again, so there's no meaning attached to the tracing of the letters in sand. It's explicitly saying that the children are, or the activity described has children using their obviously arm movements and textured material to heighten their awareness of letter shapes and the sequence of strokes of forming letters. So this activity is effective for students who are having difficulty with letter formation because it's simultaneously activates the visual, kinesthetic, and tactile sensory pathways in learning the letter shapes and associating the letter shapes with their names. So again, this question is really important because you're focusing on what the students are doing. So all of that they're doing is they're tracing letters of the alphabet in sand. So they're not hearing a letter and then tracing it. They're not reading it in print and then writing it down. It's explicitly focusing on their ability to write the letter and know the shape of the letter.
As students begin to read, the ability to blend phonemes orally contributes to their reading development primarily because it helps students A, recognize and understand sight words in a text, B, use knowledge of letter sound correspondence to decode words, C, guess the meaning of unfamiliar words from their context, or D, divide written words into onsets and rhymes. So blending phonemes orally, with that example earlier that we talked about, cat, for example, cat. their ability to put those sounds together is what the question is asking. Why would that help them develop as beginning readers? So recognize and understand sight words. So a sight word is a word that they have been exposed to so much that they've memorized, so they're not typically going to be blending the phonemes in that sight word. It's going to be an automatic word that they already know, so that's why we'll rule out A. We'll rule out C because guessing the meaning of an unfamiliar word is not a best practice for blending phonemes and having students practice with speech. Guessing is just, in general, not an effective teaching strategy for students. D, divide written words into onsets and rhymes. Students' ability to separate a word into that oral sound, we don't know how that's going to help them later reading. Dividing words into onset and rhyme can be just a purely sound activity. So that's why B is the best answer. Use knowledge of letter sound correspondence to decode words. So taking in that consistent understanding that C makes the k sound, A makes the A sound, and T makes the T sound is how it'll help them begin to read. They can put those sounds together. So blending phonemes contributes to reading development because there's a correspondence, which is the alphabetic principle, between those letters and the sounds that come with those letters. So phonemic blending is the ability to combine a sequence of speech sounds, phonemes together to form a word. Beginning readers use their skill in phonemic blending and their knowledge of letter sound correspondence to sound out and blend sounds of simple printed words.
So then another related question, a student is ready to begin explicit phonics instruction when he or she has mastered which of the following skills along the phonological awareness continuum. So I think we had this question earlier too, but let's just go ahead and review it anyways. So A is being aware that a word is made up of one or more phonemes. B, being able to separate a word's onset and rhyme. C, being aware that words can be divided into syllables, or D, being able to segment and blend a word's phonemes. So I'm gonna go ahead and let you guys answer this one since we did already go over it. So think about what option is best for students transitioning to or being able to begin explicit phonics instruction. So that means that they have to be the furthest along the phonological awareness umbrella to be able to start that transition to the alphabetic principle and phonics instruction. So the answer is D. We talked about this before, like I said. So a student who is able to segment and blend the phonemes in words is ready to begin explicit phonics instruction based off of the question. So the student understands that words are made up of individual sounds and is ready to learn how to map those sounds and graphemes or letters, where the other options are pretty low level skills. So D has the highest level skills. So being aware that a word is made up of one or more phonemes, that can relate to phonemic awareness, and that can also relate to general word awareness. So those would be lower level skills compared to D. And then onset and rhyme, again, is a lower level skill, and then syllables is an even lower level. So the most complex, the most prepared student in this scenario would be D. So then that's where we're going to stop today, but we just provided you with some visual review again because every learner is different of going over the print, alphabetic principle, and phonics. Defines the alphabetic principle, environmental print, emergent literacy, which we didn't touch too much on, and then book handling skills. So if you just want to review those, feel free. But that is all we have for today, and we will pick up where we left off on phonics, and we'll start talking about decoding and more phonics instruction in the next session.
Thanks for watching.